All right. So we're getting into our interview now for our guest speaker segment. I want to welcome Sherry Nagam. She is head of SAE Books here at SAE International. And Sherry's got this exciting title that she's going to spotlight, and she's going to also handle our interview today. Welcome, Sherry. I'm doing good.
Hi, how are you?
So I got your title slide here, but I thought I'd jump right over here to the book that we're talking about today, and maybe we could welcome Joan Wills and Karen Ramsey-Idem to the stage.
Absolutely. I am so excited to have you both here. Thank you so much. I'll let you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your careers. Joan, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, Sherry, and thanks for this opportunity to talk with you and with this group today. So my name's Joan Wills. I have been working at Cummins for 24 years. My career started with being very supported as a young girl to follow my interests in STEM, doing a superconductivity project as a 16-year-old with my dad driving me all around town. And, I'm just really excited to be able to share this group of role models, women role models in a space where, throughout my career, I didn't see that many women until recently. I'm seeing quite a few more. And I think, getting to know many of the women as they wrote chapters for this book has been really interesting. So during my career at Cummins, I have worked in controls and diagnostics, multivariable controls, where I got to use my master's from Ohio State and the Center for Automotive Research there to lower emissions and improve the robustness of diesel and spark ignited internal combustion engines. I worked in tech strategy for a few years. I've led high horsepower and power systems technical organizations with products, power generation, as well as large internal combustion engines that go in a wide variety of amazingly large applications, from mine trucks to marine type work and locomotives. And then recently, over the past 3.5 years, I lead our electronics technical organization. So electronics are the brain across many future products. Cummins is committed to Destination Zero, to lowering the carbon footprint of our products. So electronics are in diesel internal combustion engines, where we're continuing to lower emissions, as well as in fuel cells and battery products and hybrid systems that will, get us towards lower carbon. And during that time, I've had 5 children. I've occasionally worked part-time, and I've been very supported in that by amazing managers and team members and an extended network of family and friends to manage through. So thanks for the opportunity to talk today, and I'll hand it over. Karen has been my thought partner and partner in crime in trying to innovate in DE&I initiatives for over 20 years. So I was glad to work with her on this book.
Awesome. So Karen Ramsey-Idem. I have had a 25-year to date career with Cummins. So Joan and I entered about the same time. Throughout my career, I've had a variety of technical roles, from starting in the filtration business unit, doing some core research on filtration sensors, to now where I'm leading a global technical operations excellence organization, where we look across all of our business units to understand what do we need to be able to develop and validate both technologies and products at our various technical centers around the world. It has been quite an interesting journey for me, trying to marry both the analytical and the experimental side in product and technology development. And along the way, I was able to do an expat assignment in India at what was our Cummins Technology Research India organization, and really grow that capability for the corporation. And similar to Joan, have had a few children along the way, 3 kids who are now all grown, one of which is also a mechanical engineer like myself and my husband. The other two are also in sciences, but a little bit different areas in that. And similar to Joan, I've also had really great managers, mentors, coaches throughout my career in Cummins, making sure I had great opportunities and was able to, find my own way to success in those. And as Joan mentioned, she and I have partnered for a number of years in the DEI and B space, bringing to Cummins things like the Cummins Women in Technical conferences, collaborating with SAE, collaborating with Society of Women Engineers. And the book, I think, really brings together so many of the people from our respective networks to be able to highlight their stories. So really looking forward to the conversation today.
Well, thank you so much. When I came on board SAE about 5 years ago, my first conference was COMVEC in September, and then followed up by WCX in April. And the first thing I really paid attention to were how many women were on stage, but there was no sort of like connect the dots of how they got there. And, I have two daughters, and that was really important to me, one 16 and one 8, for them to understand what opportunities are available to them. So thank you for taking on this book. I'm so excited by it. Can you talk a little bit about what the industry itself was like when you joined versus
Joan,
what it's
do you
like
want me
today?
to hop into that one first? And
Karen, you want to?
sure,
Yeah,
sure
go first,
thing.
Lisa.
So I entered the industry as a 19-year-old, as a co-op student working for NASA at Kennedy Space Center. And that was my first experience in an engineering role, really seeing what it was like out in the industry. And that experience, because I ended up working for NASA 2.5 years in total over the course of my undergrad and graduate, my master's degree. And that experience has forever changed me, particularly around my opinions and stance in regards to health, safety, and environment. Kennedy Space Center is a 25,000 plus acre wildlife refuge in addition to being a space center. Much of the work that is done there is really to maintain that wildlife refuge while still running a very viable space program. And so I was exposed to quite a bit in that, health and safety and the mindsets and training and development that you need to have in that area. And I was there during a very tragic, during the Challenger, very tragic launch. And I am part of the Order of the Engineer, and much of that was because of what I experienced in that space and holding the importance of that, right? That the decisions that I make, the things that I do as an engineer do impact other people's lives. And so I carried that with me into Cummins. And so again, I've been with Cummins 25 years. And when I first started, I began in the Cummins filtration business unit. And I was one of 2 women in the technical organization at the site that I was at. And I've seen that very much change and evolve, much more gender diverse, much more diversity, visible and invisible throughout. I think that we've gotten much more intentional about what we do and how we make the impact. to ensure that every employee feels included and has what they need to be successful in their career.
Yeah, that's an awesome
Joan, do you want to
story.
answer this one?
Yes, I will. So as I
is.
think back to my early time in engineering, so again, I was fortunate to get an internship first with the Air Force Base. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, right near Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and I got to work there for 2 summer internships and see some really
Wow.
interesting applications of science and technology. I think I was the only, I don't recall any other women or in the organization that I met at the time, but I'm not sure I noticed. I have a ton of energy and I'm blessed with that. And I know I was mitigating and expending energy to fit in. But I was very interested in the technology. And then in my undergrad, I got an opportunity to intern with General Motors. And again, very supported. Again, I don't recall other women present. I was friends with 2 other women in my undergraduate electrical engineering curriculum. And we signed up for classes together, hung out together, and that helped me with my sense of belonging in a program and organization that otherwise had very few women. I went on to volunteer in Sierra Leone in West Africa for a year, because as I graduated, I wasn't sure how I could positively impact the world with my engineering degree. And, maybe now as I see some of the programming, that comes out more for students. But for me, I had to go explore a bit. And I learned there that I could bring my expertise to problems, but I had to seek out people who understood the problems and people who had different elements of expertise than I did. I went from there and did a master's, again, kind of following my passion for social justice and trying to make a positive impact on the world. In my graduate program, I was both the only female as well as the only person born in the United States in one of my classes. And I remember hanging out in the hallway with some of my colleagues who were speaking a different language, and they took pity on me and included me in their study sessions and switched to English occasionally. But again, I expended energy that I wasn't aware I was expending to fit in. And it wasn't until Karen actually started a connection with Society of Women Engineers Smith programs to send women in kind of early to mid-career to this specialist to strategist program, that I realized it felt different when I was in a group of other women engineers. And I realized that I needed at that point to start to change the culture, to start to bring more women along, because maybe people would be stepping out if they were either aware or unaware of expending energy to fit in. So I appreciate that transformation. And I think it was around that time I brought my mom and daughter along because I was breastfeeding my youngest child at the time. And so again, I was very supported to continue pursuing my interests. But looking back on it, I was, often the only woman in the room, and often expending energy to, be part of the group and to fit in.
Nice. People often ask me what happens behind the scenes when you work on a book. And I know that we had many conversations about who we were going to include, who we were going to invite. Can you just kind of walk our listeners and viewers through, there's such a diverse group of contributors to this book. How did you guys decide who to invite and who to include?
Yeah, I'll start, and then Karen, you can add. So, we started with a selection matrix of the dimensions of diversity that we were seeking, of course, as all good engineers do. So first, what are the key industries in the commercial vehicle space? What are the key companies? And trying to make sure we had representation, geographic representation. I think we didn't get quite the global breadth that maybe we could if with another shot at selection. So I don't know that we had very many people from Asia or Europe in the book compared to what we were seeking. But we looked at generational diversity and some people that were newer in their career, others that maybe had spent more time in their career. We looked at, dimensions of diversity as you would. And then I was amazed that, we each have networks that are similar in our Cummins space, but very different in our external interaction and some of the societies we're a part of. So for me, with SAE, I connected with some of my SAE colleagues and who wrote papers, who was I familiar with from some of the conferences. I'm also a part of a group called Clean Energy Education and Empowerment through the U.S. Department of Energy, or C3E. And that's a group of women who are seeking to create mid-career role models and give awards to people who have made a progress in clean energy. So I use that network. And Maxine Savitz, who wrote the foreword, I met through that effort. And then, you know, the saying of like, you can connect to anybody with 2 dimensions of connection is true, especially with the breadth of Karen's network. And then some of the people I know from the groups I'm a part of, we were able to put together really an inspiring group of women who then agreed, despite their very busy schedule, to write a chapter in this book to try to inspire others. And you know, I think one of the things I really like is the last segment in each of the chapters on how each of the women are giving back or paying forward maybe some of the privilege that they had in their life and career, and how they're working to bring other women or underrepresented groups along into the industry at a time when we desperately need talent to transition to cleaner technologies, to manage through supply shortages, and to you know, implement some of the amazing technologies that we can use to serve humanity and to serve the industry with technical background. Karen, anything you'd add?
Karen's well, I was going to say, so it's the same process. Let's ask Karen something a little different.
All right.
When you were reading the chapters, were there any 1 or 2 people that stood out? Like you were like, oh, I've known this
There
person
were
forever, but I
several
didn't know this piece of their
that
story.
was the case. I mean, like even things, I know Joan really well, right? We go back a few years, right? And there were things in her story that I had not known and that were fascinating to me. But so many of the stories, every one of the stories, I will say, there were surprises. There were absolute pieces of wisdom that I carry with me. I will say it's been such a wonderful, such a piece of grace to be able to see this part of all of the women that are in the book. To really, you know, take that peek behind the curtain on what motivates them, the experiences that they've had in their lives, the values that they hold, and what they're trying to do as they pay it forward in the industry. It's just absolutely fascinating.
And you have to thank all these women, because everyone was so open with us about what their struggles were. And, you know, one thing that I want to point out in all of these women's books that I've done is, you know, we talk so much about women, but the men are also advocates. You know, we can see in these stories where, you know, these women really had mentors as men who wanted to help them succeed and push them forward. So I think we can't overlook that sometimes, is particularly early in their careers, you have to have that one person, whether it's, you know, male or female or whoever, to push you forward. So
Absolutely.
thank you
And
to everyone,
you know,
who's
to that
mentoring.
aspect, you know, I really do think about Anurata Ganesh, who up until 2015, 2016 was really working in academia. And she was inspired to do that by her father. And she had a lab that Cummins has been one of the sponsors for that lab, really focused on internal combustion engines. And she had a very strong, still does have a very strong relationship with John Wall, a former chief tech officer for Cummins. And he convinced her to move from academia into industry because of the impact, the bigger impact that she could have in the technologies and in the space by coming to industry, right? She was doing great things in academia, but here she had a much bigger footprint that she was going to be placing on Cummins as well as the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I love that story. That's one of my favorites. I would be incredibly remiss if I did not point out that Jennifer Rumsey is in the book and was recently promoted to president and CEO of Cummings. What does that mean for the industry? What does it mean to have someone so highly visible as a female in an industry, in a company so old?
So
as
I'll just say what it means.
Yeah. So the
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. So one of the things that I had underestimated was just how cool it is for our community. So I live in Columbus, Indiana. It's a relatively small town in Indiana. And as I walk to the farmers market, as I, go to my kids' sporting events, just how proud people are that, she grew up here. She studied engineering. She worked hard in her engineering and accomplished a lot in engineering career, and then moved into business roles. And people are just super proud of this, that we have someone who's from our town who now is leading Cummins at such a transformational time for our industry and for our company. And then having a woman as well as the CEO also makes me very proud to work at a company that invests in career development for its employees, men and women, and people from all backgrounds. But having a woman in that role as a visible leader, and having a technical an engineer in that role also. So from all of those dimensions, I just feel incredibly proud. And I see the motivation from many of the engineers, from the local community, as well as from across the industry, to just see that progression in her career. She's been involved in SAE, and so we'll continue to pull her into some SAE events, and I appreciate that support. And she's an advocate of SAE as a way to progress engineering careers and have that network. So yeah, it was a lovely week when the announcements occurred, and just saw lots of people quite proud to have her as our CEO.
Yeah, Joan, you might want to add your story about your daughter.
Oh yes, well, so my husband was in a really bad car wreck a few years ago, and and Cummins community, my team came and supported. But so one of the things, Jennifer's husband took our trash to the dump. She took my kids to school because I needed to stay home with my husband as he recovered. And so when I showed the news article to my youngest daughter, she said, "Oh, is that the lady that drove me to school?" I'm like, "Yep, that's the lady that drove me to school." So anyway, she's a person, and I think that it's nice to see, real people make progress.
She is absolutely the right person at this point in our history to take on this role. We're the industry is at an inflection point. We are transforming, and that engineering background, her knowledge across the business units, everything. I mean, it just positions her perfectly for this role, and it positions our company to really thrive as we move forward and continue to be an industry leader. It's just absolutely exciting. And, it's kind of cool that while I know Tom, I know Jen, and I feel comfortable, that she's going to be able to, connect with people. And I've heard other engineers, who said, the CEO knows my name now,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up your small town, because I lived in Terre Haute, Indiana for a number of years, and would go over to Brown County, of course, to look at the leaves and stuff. And I never thought about the impact having her as the CEO would have in that community. And it's so small. So I would imagine that was huge for you guys, outside of the industry. I never thought about that. That's excellent. Mm-hmm. So our time is winding up. Is there anything you'd like to add or leave any thoughts behind before we go?
Well, I just wanted to mention for anyone that has the book, we want others to tell their story and, to inspire with their careers. And so we designed the appendix to help you do just that, to use in book discussion groups. We picked the questions that we put there based on hundreds of mentoring conversations on where people tend to get stuck in their career, or where women in particular ask for help. in either mentoring circles or mentoring discussions. And so the stories then in the chapters are how people have overcome or, struggled through some of those challenges. So one of the things I found useful in my career, both when I was a newer engineer as well as later on, is a concept of mentoring circles where, maybe two more senior employees then have a group of people who they mentor together, and often the mentees mentor each other as much or more as the more senior team members, because things change in the world and they're just going through similar things. So the appendix is designed for book discussion, mentoring circle discussion, to try to inspire people at various points in their career.
Outstanding. I just want to mention that you will be at Convec. We will be doing a book signing
The
on
20th.
Tuesday at 12:30. That is, September 20th. It's also Joan's birthday, so we will have cake. If you're there, please stop by. We would love to meet you and have everybody
Thank
sign the
you.
book.
Take care.
Thank you so much for your time, ladies. I appreciate it.